Hello, good day, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Oluwatosin, and in this tutorial, we are going to be learning how to draft a pencil sketch pattern from start to finish. This video is a very simple and easy tutorial, and it is absolutely beginner friendly. So, if this sounds like what you are interested in, come along with me. Basically, these are the measurements required to cut out a pencil sketch pattern. And here are the materials we are going to be working with. So we are going to start our drafting with the front, and this is the pattern paper. Firstly, I'm going to be creating my starting point from the top of the pattern paper. I'll measure 1 inch downward, and then I'll connect that point into a straight line. Basically, this is just as a guide. It is just the starting point. Then from there, I'm going to, I have to figure out if my skirt is going to have band or not. In this case, this pencil skirt is going to have band of 1.5 inch. So I'm going to place the 1.5 inch up just like I did, and then I'll mark out the full length. Then I'm going to add 1 inch allowance for folding the down, or if it's going to be fully lined for turning the down. The next thing is I'm going to mark out the hip line. This person's hip line is 9, so I'm going to be marking out the hip line or the hip point. After that, I'm going to be connecting all of these points into straight lines as well. When I'm done connecting, this is me just labeling. So the starting point, the hip line, and then the full length. The next thing to do is to start transferring my measurement to my pattern. And to do this, I'm going to divide the waistline by 4. Our waistline is 34, divided by 4 gives me 8.5. So I'll mark that point. Then on the hip line, I'll proceed to measuring a hip and dividing by 4. A hip is actually 42, divided by 4 gives me 10.5. I'm going to mark that point. Then on the full length point, I'm going to mark the hip divided by 4 as well. So I'm still going to be marking 10.5 at that point for now. So I'm going to connect all of these points together with the help of my curved ruler. I'm just going to connect the waistline to the hip and then down to the full length. When I'm done doing this, the next thing to do is to figure out my dart. So I'm just going to divide my bust span by 2, or my nipple to nipple. I'm going to divide it by 2. This person's nipple to nipple is 7, divided by 2 gives me 3.5. I'm just going to mark the 3.5 on the waistline point. Then from that 3.5, I'm going to mark half inch forward and then half inch backward. The next thing to do is to figure out the length of my dart. In this case, I'm going to be using 5 inches from the waistline downward. So I'm just going to mark 5, and when I'm done doing this, I'm going to draw out my dart line. Then, since we are cutting a pencil skirt, we are not cutting a straight skirt, it's a pencil skirt. You need to figure out how pencil you want the lower part of your skirt to be. So in this case, I'm just going to be deducting 1.5 from the initial 10.5 that I marked. If you want it so pencil, you can deduct 2. If you are even working on a stretchy fabric, you can proceed to deducting 2.5. But for the case of this tutorial, I'm just going to be using 1.5. So I'm going to be marking my 1.5, and then I'm going to look for a way to connect that point into the original curve, like into the hip curve. Guys, if at this point you are still with me, please do well by subscribing to my channel. So after connecting the line into the hip curve, the next thing to do, I'm just going to shade out that part just as a reminder that it is not really part of my measurement for now. So now I have to add sewing allowance to my skirt. You can decide to do this when you are transferring to the fabric, and you can do it now on the pattern. I'm just going to do it now on the pattern. So I'm going to be using sewing allowance of 1.5 inch. On the hip line, I measured 1.5. Then on the waistline, I'm going to firstly add the 1 inch that I'm going to use as my dart before marking out 1.5 inch as the sewing allowance. Then on the pencil part of the skirt, that's the full length side, I'm going to add 1.5 inch as well as allowance. And you remember that I initially deducted 1.5 inch. So that means I'm just going to take it back to the previous 10.5 that I marked from the initial stage. I hope you guys get how we got to this point. So I'm going to connect all these allowance points together as well. And basically that is it for the front panel. Hope you guys remember that after joining the dots, I'm going to lose 1 inch. So it's still going to come back to the 1.5 inch allowance. I hope you guys get what I'm trying to say. Then, when I'm transferring to my main fabric, it has to be on the front panel, has to be on fold of two. So that I don't forget and cut it single the way I'm marking it on the pattern paper. I'm just going to put a mark at that point. This is just as a reminder that when I'm transferring to my main fabric, that part has to be on fold of two. Then after then I'll proceed to cutting it out, and basically this is it for the front panel. The next thing to do is to transfer this to the back panel. So I'll place it on the back panel, and then I'm going to add additional 1.5 inch allowance. This 1.5 inch is going to serve as the zip allowance at the upper part of the skirt, and then at the lower part of the skirt is going to serve as the slit. Now, depending on the kind of slit that I want, if I want my slit, I have to determine if my slit is going to climb like lap each other, or is just going to be like a straight slit that is going to be exposed and not lap each other. I hope you guys get what I'm trying to say. So in a case where the slit is not going to lap, I'm going to leave it the back pattern like this. I'm just going to mark out the dart, and that is it basically. But in a case where the slit is going to lap, firstly, I'm going to pick the place where I want the slit to start from. Since the whole length of this skirt is 26, I want the slit to start from 17. So I'm going to mark 17, and from that point of 17, I'm going to add 2.5 inches allowance to the lower parts of the skirt. This is going to serve as the slit that is going to lap each other. So this is just me still measuring the 2.5 inches at that part. I'm using the inches side of my ruler. Then I'm going to connect these points together. And that will be it for a pencil skirt that is going to have a lapping slit. But if the slit is not going to lap, like I said initially, there's no need adding this additional 2.5 inches. So the next thing to do is to cut this out. So I'm just going to cut this out, and then after cutting it out, I'll proceed to marking the darts just like I did for the front panel. I'm just going to trace out the dart. Since I already marked it at the front, I'm just going to trace it out at the back, and then I'm going to measure the hip line, the dart line, and I'm just going to draw out my dart line. Basically that is it for the pattern. So now we are done drafting pattern for the front and then for the back, and this is what the two patterns look like. So if the back is going to have a lapping slit, it's going to look like this, but if not, if the slit is not going to lap, this is what the back pattern is going to look like. The next thing is to transfer our pattern into the main fabric, and since we already added all the allowance while drafting out the pattern, you just have to place it on your fabric and cut the exact same thing. But do not forget that the front panel has to be on fold of two before cutting it out. After this, the next thing is to cut out the band, and then to cut out the band, I love to cut my band for pencil skirts after shaping the front and the back panels together, so that I can measure what I have round the waistline, including the zipper allowance, and then I'll proceed to cutting. I said this band is going to be 1.5 inches wide, so I'm just going to cut four so that when I fold into two, it's going to give me two, and then I'll use half inch allowance to add it to the body of the skirt itself. That's to join it to the skirt, and then it's going to remain 1.5 inch allowance. I hope someone found this video helpful and interesting. Please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share this video amongst your soulmates. You don't know who might need this. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to ask me in the comment section. Thank you so much for sticking with me from the beginning of this tutorial to this point. I'll see you in my next video. Bye bye.